All right. So first off, thank you all for joining me here. And a little bit about me. There's a lot to cover, so I'm gonna go over really a lot of this really quickly. My name is Lady Ariel. I hail from the Rising Wind, specifically in Indianapolis here. And I have been doing foam smithing for quite some time, 5 or 6 years, going on past that, before that even. What I kind of want to share with you is just a little bit of the process that I go through, and like how I make things like this and a few other things you're going to see through the video. If you have questions, please chime in, let me know, and I'd be more than welcome to, or more than happy to answer those as I go. So the first thing that you need to know as far as foam smithing is you need to have a really good intimate knowledge of whatever rule book you're working with. And so I have constantly been reading the weapon rules and everything like that, where it's been, so I'm going to change this real quick. There we go. If there's some changes that are made, if there's like an update that's made, I always take a look and see what is changed and how that affects like weapon construction and so forth. So there's a few things I would suggest getting if you don't already have them, if you are looking to foam smith, do any kind of things, and not just like swords and weapons like this, but also shields or anything really that has to do with foam. One of the main things I would suggest is some sort of weapon checker. A lot of these are 3D printed, and they are really easy, really cheap to make. Find someone with a 3D printer, have them print out a few of them. This is absolutely invaluable during the process of making something that is going to be used on the field. Past that, like I said, there's going to be a lot of other stuff. I'm going to be going through those as I go. So the first main step in creating really anything is to have an idea of what you want to make. Whether this is a pattern, whether this is something you see online or in a video, or like, sometimes books will have illustrations. You go, I want to make that. That's kind of where you want to start and kind of get a basic idea from there. Now, drafting and all kinds of engineering like that is beyond the scope of this video. I'm going to be, or maybe in a future lesson I could go into that more. But where you generally want to start is to make the blade. So I'm going to focus mostly on like actual swords, or like weapons with a elongated blade, instead of like axes that have more of a shape like this. And to do that, you need a billet. Yes, I am using a blacksmithing term because if we don't have interesting names for things, nobody's going to take us seriously. So to make the billet, so ultimately the billet is going to look like this. It looks like a block of foam, and it is just something that is layered up with a little foam wrapped on the outside. And I made a little cross-sectional piece here to show you what this is going to look like. And I did try to highlight this with a bit of marker to kind of show you the laminations here. But essentially, you're going to take 3 layers, 1, 2, and 3, and you're going to glue those together using your contact cement of choice. I use Weldwood because it's what is readily available to me. And the key to this is you want to make sure it dries to a nice tacky surface, and then clamp the pieces together. It's going to provide a very rock solid bond. So now you're going to notice, obviously, there's going to be a hole or a channel that's cut all the way through there. What you want to do is take a strip of foam like that, that is about 1 inch shorter than the widest section of your blade. So if your blade is going to be 2.5 inches, which is the minimum for most like LARPs, you're going to want to do at least 1.5 inches. I usually go 1 3/4 to ensure that my weapons are legal and it's not going to, cause any issues. So that's the strip there. Then you're going to have another strip here with a channel cut into it. This channel is going to be determined by what your core is. And so a lot of people are going to be, yeah, this is the box method. So what? Okay, bear with me. So once you've got your inner sandwich here of 3 layers, then you're going to want to put a piece on the outside that goes all the way around the blade, or I guess you can call it the circumference of the blade itself. And that's going to create the striking surface. Sorry, I lost my train of thought here. Now, what I do that is different, that I highly suggest people maybe take a look at and see if it's for you, is I use varying degrees of density in my foam. And so this middle section here, these two pieces right there and there, are going to be much denser. They're going to be about 6-pound density XLPE, which is cross-linked polyethylene. If you ever use ether tubes, XLPE. The two bread portions of our sandwich there are going to be 4 pounds. Now, the reason I do that is because the 6-pound is going to make it much more durable. So as the core impacts the inside of the foam, and this impacts your opponents, it's going to get compressed slightly. If it's a higher density foam, it's going to compress less and break down slower. Now, the 4-pound density here, obviously you don't want to get hit incidentally by the flat of the blade. This is going to be just squishy enough that's not going to really hurt. It's going to give a little bit to it. And that's why there's those varying degrees of densities through that. So the outside portion here, that is where I use 2-pound density foam. This is going to give a really nice, soft, pillowy strike surface. It's not going to be very hard at all, and it's going to pass muster very easily. It's not going to cause many issues on the field. So that's the billet. That's how I make that. And it ends up looking like this. Now, sometimes you can just keep that squared if you want, if that's kind of the shape you're going for. I generally put some kind of a curve there. Keep in mind, this is not always going to pass as a striking surface for some games, i.e. like DAG. So you might have to make like more squared off sections there just to make it a little bit more strike legal. But that's kind of what you're left with there. Now, your core, like I said, there's a variety of cores out there that you can use. I use Kite Spar. It's a very commonly used core, very easy, cheap to get. But you can use things like tent posts, PVC if you really want something that's really heavy and kind of questionable, honestly. But really just anything that you would put as a core in any other weapon, you can pretty much use in these. Yeah, so do I have any questions so far? Does that make sense mostly? Okay. All right, so where do we go from there? So we've got our billet. Now we're going to start shaping it. And that's kind of, I do want to make mention though, I am in a communal living area at the moment, so I can't really do a whole lot of sawing, so I can't really show you what I'm doing. But when you start to shape your billet, you're going to end up with something like this. So you can see that this edge is cut down to a much finer, much sharper edge as the striking surface. And sorry, I must have spilled some glue or something on that. So anyway, so that's going to be kind of the shape that you're going for if you want to get it really profiled, make it look like an actual blade. And that's kind of the goal with a lot of foam smithing. If you're just making something for a tourney sword, get some ether tube or something and put a sock over it. That's basically it. But for something that's going to look really nice and bring your A game up, this is kind of what I would suggest. So to achieve this, you can just take any sharp knife. Just take a sharp knife and very carefully go along the edge and start kind of cutting down that edge. And then you can use sandpaper to really true that up. And so sandpaper won't do a whole lot of, unless it's like a power sander or something like that. It's just there to kind of knock down the burrs that you're going to get with like a knife, that kind of thing. Or you can use a bandsaw, something with a tilting table that you can actually adjust the angle on, and the fence, so you can adjust how deep you want this edge to go. So as this goes, you're going to push that through the blade, but be very careful. This does not act like wood. It's going to be very easy to lose control of this. It will flex. Just be very careful. But then you pass it through once, and then you just kind of flip it over and pass it through the other way, and you end up with a very nice symmetrical striking surface. From there, you've got a number of ways that you can shape this blade, make it more like your end goal, whatever that happens to be. So one example is this. So I've got that edge. Now this is a much wider striking surface, which some games do require, must be a little bit wider on that end. But what I've also done is chamfer the backs of this. Now later on, what I'm going to do is knock down these corners with a Dremel tool. So this will be actually nice and perfectly rounded over. And there'll be a reason for that later. But this gives you kind of a nice chisel tip to your weapon. And make sure that you have your core longer than is necessary. That way you can always cut it down if you need to, and then go from there. But that's going to kind of give you the profile that you want to make it look more blade-like. Now, obviously, these aren't hard and fast rules, because as you can see, there are other weapons that have more of a complex curve to them. And so it does change a little bit. This is not something I can really easily put on my bandsaw and make work. So this is something I had to do with a knife. I had to do all of this by hand because, you know, obviously, if you've got a plane like this curve is going to get left out. If that makes sense, I hope so. Anyway, so from there, you kind of have to make a decision what you want to do as far as a cover. Now, you can do something as simple as just a piece of cloth that's pulled over the blade itself, and you can sew that, or you can use like a sock or whatever you want to use, whatever happens to be on hand. Or you can make this kind of an interesting piece where it's actually the flats of the blade are foam and the edges are going to be fabric. And so it kind of ends up looking like this. So this piece right here is all I believe it's 3mm craft foam. And so it's going to be basically a cap that you put over the fabric. So let me show you how we do that. So first thing is you got to get your fabric. Now this is a 4-way stretch. So it stretches this way and it also stretches this way. And so it's a very useful fabric when it comes to making sword covers, that kind of thing. It can be a little difficult to sew, but I suck at sewing, so that's kind of, you know, up to you on that one. But what I've done is I've cut this in a 3-inch wide strip all the way down, so it gives me plenty to work with. Now from here, you're going to need a different kind of adhesive, which is this Loctite spray adhesive. It is the professional grade. It's like the level 300, the heavy duty grade. This is what I use for this because of 2 reasons. One, it's spray adhesive. So I can actually just take this outside and just spray the edge down. Usually 1 or 2 coats is just fine. You don't need to do this really super heavy. But the second reason, most importantly, is that this is a glue that does not harden up. So like before with the contact cement, that does harden up. It does kind of give a little bit of a crusty texture, you know, to it. So it's not good for a striking surface. So you're going to put that, so that spray adhesive, you put it on the side of your blade and on the back of your striking surface of your your fabric. Let that dry, maybe 5-10 minutes at most. It doesn't really take too long. And then what you're going to do is very carefully, I usually lay this down on my table first and then put my blade down on top of it. And that way the strike surface is nice and flat and air bubble free. And then you can kind of start smoothing it out from there. So it's going to kind of end up looking like this. Here, let me see if I can get the bottom of this. There we go. So it'll end up looking kind of like this on the surface of your blade. And then from there, one note. Now this is Amcard specific. Some LARPs are a little different about this. From the strike surface to the very edge of this piece of foam that I mentioned, you have to make sure that there's a 1/2 inch. As long as you've got that, you're fine. But then you can cover the flat of the blade with that piece of foam, and it will overlap this fabric by just a little bit, just enough to give it a little bit of hold and keep that fabric on. I found this is a very good method. I've never really had any issues with it. A lot of my weapons have been on the field for several years without much in the way of damage goes. And I found that, yeah, it's not exactly a replaceable kind of method, but it is a very aesthetically pleasing method, because then you can do all kinds of stuff with the flats of your blade. Like this, as I mentioned previously, has a little bit of paint and a little bit of texturing to it, and that does kind of give it a nice surface. So yeah, so that's kind of how you're going to do the blade on that one. Now, like I said, if you want something that is more performance oriented but still looks good, still use this fabric and sew a cover for the sword that you can actually take on and off as you need it. And because this is 4-way stretch material, it's going to conform to the profile of the blade, and it's going to give it kind of a nice actual blade looking feel. So we've gone through basic steps, basic billet making, and into the shaping of the blade, and as well as the cover of the blade as well. Sorry, I'm just thinking my notes here. So what happens when you need to actually finish out the blade? You can't just paint it. I mean, you can, but it's not really going to give you a very good finished appeal. Now this is going to go a lot more into the cross piece and then like the hilt of the blade and that kind of thing. But a lot of people who are familiar with making really nice shields know that plastidip is one of the best materials for covering really anything that needs to be near a striking surface, or it's going to be hit and taking abuse over a lot of time, a lot of period of time. So that's generally what I use when I'm getting ready to finish my blade. Unfortunately, I don't have any plastidip here, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it. On the blade itself. So once you've got the fabric and that top piece that I mentioned on, you're going to want to actually mask off that fabric using a little bit like painter's tape or masking tape, whatever you have that's going to release really easily. So it's not going to be something that's going to really stick like duct tape. That runs the risk of pulling the fabric up off that glue that you put down previously. But once you've masked off that strike surface, take it outside, get one of the spray cans of plastidip, shake it up real good, and just give it a good coat. Not too much, because plastidip, while it does self-level, too much will create runs in your work, and it's going to kind of mess up the texture to it. So I usually do one medium coat, like nothing like super light, so it's just like speckling here and there, but one good coat, let that dry. A second good coat of the same color, I generally use black, and like there's a dark gray color. So I start with black and coat the whole thing, let that dry, give it one more coat, and then after that second one dries, I'll switch to the gray. Now what this does, sorry, hang on. So what this does is it allows you to see visually where your layers are laying. This is also a good method for anyone doing like art and that kind of thing. Anything with paints, that you want to make sure that the layers that you're putting on are even. So once the black, you've got a good foundation of the black, put a good foundation of, or a good layer of the gray, and you can visually see that these are even and that you're not missing spaces. So one big missed location, especially on this blade. So you've got this foam piece here, but the edge of the foam right through across there, sometimes that does not pick up plastidip if you're just spraying it head on. So you need to turn it to the side and get that side bit there, and that's going to really make it pop. So generally I repeat this process. It depends on the project, of course, but it's usually I'll do a black layer, gray layer, black layer, and then I'll end on a gray layer. That gray layer actually acts as a primer for whatever you happen to do. So for example, if I'm doing just a plain metallic blade, such as this one here, you can see that this silver spray paint actually has a little bit of a luster to it to match that strike surface. And the way that is achieved is not just by the silver spray paint that I use, but also because you have a gray base coat that actually aids in metallics. Generally, if you use any kind of metallic paint, a gray base coat is going to be your best friend. Whites make it a little bit too pearlescent, but generally a good gray base coat is going to make that look pretty nice there. So you can kind of see what that's going to look like. So now there is a little bit of pillowing here, and you can sew darts into your cover if you really want to. I don't bother with it because I don't like sewing. So, but that's kind of the idea that you're going to go for, is that finish. So now that we've got the blade finished, technically that is it. Once you've pulled out that tape and you've revealed everything, that blade is done, and you can set that to the side and work on other things. I'm sorry, I'm going to check my time here. Okay, the next part of the build process is going to be what kind of decorative elements, like what is this weapon going to be? If you are making like a gladius, for example, even they have cross pieces. They're like the little U-shaped blocks of wood that go directly beneath the blade. Even that is something that you have to decide what you want to do with that. So one good example is, for my Pokemon fans out there, is Hone Edge. So Hone Edge has a very simple cross piece that is just an arc that just kind of matches the profile of the blade, and obviously the big eye in the center, but that's beside the point. You basically just have this big arc here. And the hilt is even more simple. It's just a column here that flares out with a rounded pommel over the top. Now, as I said before, with like axes and that kind of thing, hilts and pommels are a little outside the scope of this video right now, but I am always open to answering questions, that kind of thing. But pretty much this is kind of what you're looking at here. This is all 6-pound XLPE. And it's going to give a really good firm grip to it. That way it's not going to deform when you're actually swinging the blade. Anyway, so I prepared a little bit of a design for a cross piece, and I wanted to do something kind of more historically based. Well, okay, ish. If you're familiar with fencing, you know what a main gouge is. It's an offhand dagger that has a bit of a ring to it, and that ring actually catches the blade of your opponent's rapier, and you can snap that sucker right off. So how I came to this design, excuse me, is I put a center mark right where the core would actually travel through the cross piece, and that'll be important later. But I found out that there was a bit of a rectangle, like right between my fingers there. That is where the blade the end of the blade would actually sit against the cross piece. From there, I just designed a couple little quillions that have like little rounded edges that do also satisfy the 2-inch minimum for a cross piece there. Same thing with the ring. I just kind of made a couple curves here and there, kind of followed that through and created that ring so that way it would look more like a main gouge. So take this, oh, I should mention foam. There are all kinds of different thicknesses of foam that you can get. This is 6-pound XLPE that I actually have in an inch thickness. And this is actually what I use to make a lot of cross pieces, because 1/2-inch thickness is great for blades because you're going to have to layer that up and it's going to have a little bit more complexity to it. But something like a cross piece, the less pieces that you have to glue together, the better. That's going to increase durability and decrease the amount of glue time that you have. So generally, one piece of this, if you're going to do like a flat kind of cross piece sort of thing, or multiple pieces if you're going to actually like do a little bit more shaping to it. And that all can be ordered online, and maybe later I'll discuss that, but that's all kind of secondary. So I basically took this, put it flat on my foam and cut it out from there. And what I got was this. So this is a piece of foam. Now you'll notice I've done already a little bit of shaping, but generally that outside piece right there is kind of what you're going to get. From there, what I did is I actually just chamfered the edges. I'm going to get real close to the camera here. Chamfered the edges to give a little bit more of a profile And then I kind of chose where those facets were going to lay in terms of how the overall piece is going to look. Then on the other side, I went ahead and took a Dremel and I smoothed that out. So it's much more rounded and much more natural looking, looks more like a piece of metal that's been shaped. And that's kind of what I wanted to show you on that one. So the ring has been rounded as well on that side. So let's put this together and see how it looks with our blade. Now, obviously this blade is not finished. That's fine. I'm not going to go through that with you, but or actually I kind of already have. There we go. So I'm going to push that through. And so that's kind of what you're going to get right there. So you've got this nice pair of quillions with that loop there. And it already is shaping up to be a very, very nice weapon. So the cross piece can actually be finished very, very similar to the blade. However, when you're doing shaping, especially when you're working with a Dremel, you're gonna get, how to say, like little burrs. Basically, the of course, it's not wood. It's not gonna act like wood. The surface is going to be a lot softer. It's going to have like little burrs that are going to be kind of poking up. And if you use spray plastic dip, it's going to adhere to those things and kind of stick out like little, I don't know, little burrs, I guess. Yeah. So it's not going to give you a perfectly smooth finish. That is where the liquid plastic dip, that's where that's going to come in play. So generally I use a mix of 1-to-1 plastic dip liquid in the can type, pour that into a resealable container, and then I do naphtha, 1 part naphtha to 1 part plastic dip, and mix that together. That's going to thin the plastic dip out and allow you to get much smoother results. So in this case, I know it's kind of hard to see, like you're not going to be able to tell how smooth this is, but you kind of see that glassy surface there. That's actually what happens when you use that liquid plastic dip. Look how pretty that is. I'm sorry, I'm really proud of myself. So this liquid plastic dip is going to give you much more consistent results and prevent a lot of that weird stippling effect that the spray will get anytime that you shape the foam. So yeah, and then once you plastic dip it, and you do this kind of the same thing. Do 1 or 2 good coats of the liquid stuff, and then you can switch the spray after that. Plastic dip is what's called self-leveling. And basically what that means is with spray paint, if you spray too much and you get those little runs, those runs are going to dry like that. Plastic dip is a little bit more forgiving in that manner. So if you actually have a, let's say a shield, and you set it on a non-level surface and you use the plastic over that, it's actually going to settle level to the actual surface that it's on and not level to the actual like table, if it, you know. Now, obviously it has its limits. If you put too much of this on, it is still going to roll and pool in areas that you don't want it to. But if you do it in thin enough layers, you don't have to worry about that. It goes on very even, very thin automatically. So once you've built up that base layer of the liquid stuff, the spray stuff has a nice, even level surface, and you don't have to worry about it adhering to those little again, I come up with a word for that yet, little burrs of foam that come with that. And then it's paint, and I use acrylic paint. I pick it up from Walmart. I have been using this new product that I am just now getting familiar with. It's called Angelus paint. Oh, there we go. So Angelus paint is really awesome because it's an acrylic paint, but it's designed with like things like foam and leather and like that kind of thing, rubber in mind. So you can paint it on things, bend them in half, and it's not going to crack. So these paints are really, really awesome for anyone that's working with foam that wants to put a little bit of flash into their project and that kind of thing. So highly recommend trying that product. It's really served me well in the past. All right, so I did say that we're not going to really focus much on hilts. I do want to mention something that is to me, very important, and that is leather. if you put a leather hand wrap on your weapon, it's going to increase the controllability, the balance of the weapon tremendously. I mean, like this thing was absolutely unwieldy if I didn't have the leather on, but the leather actually gives me a very wonderful gripping surface that I can actually swing this like it was just some tourney sword, you know. So that's something I definitely suggest people look into. There are Tandy leather stores all across the nation. They have little 8x11 squares of leather that you can buy for really cheap. They're like 15, 16 bucks. And you can create a really nice leather wrap for really anything. I mean, this is not just fancy smancy, like, you know, court weapons. This is also for, you know, regular Omni blades. It will seriously increase the performance of your weapon tremendously just by doing that one step. And that way you also don't have to do anything major as far as your handle goes. It's just a cylinder and you wrap it with leather. That's it. So now, I guess I should also mention things. Where to go from here? I believe the other class in breakout room A is called taking your crafting to the next level. Well, we're going to do that here as well. If you are making a sword, nothing says, hey, look at the awesome weapon that I have, like LED. And it's actually very easy to use. So this weapon lights up, believe it or not. In fact, I basically built this little chamber in here to hold a battery pack for a set of LED fairy lights that you can buy at like Joann's or, you know, and then if I flip this on, hopefully it'll show up. Look at that. Yep, it lights up. And this is deceptively bright. It's here with, you know, several lights going. It doesn't look like much, but I have lit my path walking the woods at night at an Amp Guard event and had no problem seeing where I'm going. That's a fantastic use of electronics, in my opinion. There is also, stay, okay. Also in Hone Edge, there is actually a little battery pack right here, and he lights up. And this is actually, these batteries are much fresher than the other ones, so this is actually being a lot brighter than what you see in that one. This is super easy as well. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but basically you just have to find ways to put like channels going through your foam that's not going to like impact like your strike surface, that kind of thing. And then try to find some fairly translucent foam, which is sometimes very kind of difficult to do, but shield foam is a good example. The very classic white plank foam that you get for shields, that's actually fairly well translucent for lights. And so that's actually how I made these pieces here, this and the crystal for the other one. Is it's just a piece of shield foam that I shaped and cut and basically put over the LED. So if I were to take his eye out, which is gruesome, you would see a ring of LED lights on the inside of this that backlight that, and this helps to disperse that effect. Sound effects, minor CPU kind of stuff like that. If you want to have like different light effects and that kind of thing, it is literally sky is the limit for this. If you want to do something really cool with your weapons. So let me check my time here. Okay. I guess moderators, if you want to kind of open up the floor for questions, does anyone have any questions over the process, over any of the materials or the products that I use? No, pretty good. All right. So
I have one actually.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
How did you discover the mix between Plastidip and the other substances that you're using?
Sorry, say that one more time.
How did you come up with that mix? What sort of test did you do to figure out what worked best?
Yeah, just a little bit of existing information and just a little bit of experimentation. It really does come down to that. Plastidip weapons were not new by any means when I first started doing this, but you had like one person in any given kingdom doing this. And you actually see this a lot more in games like Nero or like Dark Han, really like the really LARP heavy LARPs, or sorry, RP heavy LARPs. A lot of their weapons don't even have a fabric striping yet. It's all latex based. And that's actually what they use is plastic. Now plastic shields, on the other hand, tons of people have those. And so it was just a matter of taking that existing technique and that existing technology and applying it to something different. And it really comes down to a little bit of like cheesing the rules in a way, because the rules don't explicitly say that your blades cannot have plastic dip on the flats. As long as you have that striking surface, flat blades technically don't have to have fabric on the flat of the blade. Which is kind of what led me to this process. And people in the Rising Winds know me well enough that I make quality weapons that are going to pass muster. So I can't promise if I took my weapons to another kingdom, oh, you've got plastic dip on the flat of the blade, that's bad. I can't promise that necessarily, but people in RW know I am very, very rules oriented, and I know kind of what is safe for contact and that kind of thing. Does that answer your question? Is that kind of?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I would like to say that actually the rules were written explicitly so that plastic dip could be used on non-striking issues.
It's so funny because it's like, yeah, if you read between the lines and then you actually know the story behind it. Yes, absolutely. It's just they don't make mention of it, and so they're not super like out there. Yeah. Oh, I do want to mention there are certain products that don't really jive well with plastic dip. So plastic dip and then acrylic paint, fantastic. There is a product called Glossifier, which is a plastic dip product that is meant to go over plastic dip, and it basically creates a nice shiny surface, right? Do not use this if you're going to be using acrylic paint. I found what happens if you've got just plain, so okay, hang on, let me, okay, so for example, this black, that's just plastic dip, that is not black paint. So it's plastic dip with a little purple metallic paint over the top of it. If I were to spray Glossifier over this, it would peel and chip up over the acrylic paint, but it would stay nice and tight to the plastic dip. So learn that one the hard way.
That's really good.
Yeah, what's that?
That's a really good tip. Thank you.
Yeah, it's because I was thinking, oh, Glossifier, of course, why wouldn't you use this? This is going to be a great top coat. If you want a really good top coat, I would suggest doing it's Mod Podge. So I don't have it here. So there's a Mod Podge spray that's specifically designed as a top coat. And if you spray that over it, it actually creates a really nice shiny surface. That's what I've been using since then, and I have not used the Glossifier since. So what other questions do we have?
Do you have any opinions about people using clear roofing cover as, are you familiar?
Yeah, so I mean, basically this is, your mileage may vary. That is literally it. So what's the frog goop or something, all those products are great. I have no complaints against them. I don't particularly use them just because I'm set in my ways. I have my methodology, and that's what I go with on that one. By all means, try different things, see what works better. I have heard that some of those products do hold up better than plastic dip, but I've never run into a situation where plastic wasn't sufficient. So again, your mileage may vary.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. If you are curious about some of the work that I do have a Facebook page. It's Lavashmore Creations. It's French. I don't expect you to know how to spell that. I'm sure I can provide the information to everyone later. So what other questions do we have? All right, excellent. I am always available for questions if you have. So on Facebook, I am April Danielle, also Lavash More Creations. You are more than welcome to message me on there if you have questions about the process. I'm not really doing foamsmithing as much anymore. I'm focusing more on leatherworking. Technically, I was in leatherworking before I was doing foamsmithing, so I'm kind of going back to my roots with this. And right, got it. So one thing that you can do now that I just kind of thought about it is if you want to make a scabbard, paper mache is fantastic. So for the hone edge, you have this basic scabbard that I'm going to then add on to, and it will have the full hone edge piece there. Anytime that you can add leather working, if you can meld these two, it's fantastic. You can make sword frogs, scabbards for them, leather inserts for like handle, pommel, and like that. They're fantastic bits to really add a little bit more flair. Never mind, that's gonna fall over. So yeah, yeah.
You have 4 minutes before passing
4 minutes.
period.
Okay, got it. I'm trying to think. I'm honestly trying to think of anything I've missed. Shields. So shields much very the same way. So this is something I've been putting together. If you're familiar with Gundam, that is one thing right there. And it's kind of the same as weapons, except for you don't have to have a cloth cover. You fully plastic the whole thing. Painting is all pretty self-explanatory. Just kind of get good at really small details. If you're doing kind of like runes or anything like that on the flats of your blade, get a good Dremel. Dremels are absolutely fantastic. They are one of my most used tools. It really helps smooth out surfaces, that kind of thing. A good scroll saw, especially because that can get you the, I'm gonna knock stuff over while I do this. If you're doing like inside circles like this, a scroll saw is gonna be your best friend, because otherwise you're gonna have to cut that with a knife, and nobody wants to do that. So in the debate over bandsaw versus scroll saw, I lean more towards get the scroll saw first, learn how to use that, and then upgrade to a bandsaw later, because the bandsaw is kind of limited in its usability. Yeah, so that a good straight edge, a metal ruler. I've got this one right here, which is a metal ruler as well, or a metal yardstick, or both. Are fantastic for use, not just like measuring, but also getting a nice, perfect straight edge to it. Invest in chip brushes. If you're doing any kind of painting, any kind of glue work, especially, really cheapo chip brushes like this, I buy them by the dozen. Every time I go to like a hardware store, I grab a big handful of them and just buy them and put them away in my drawer there. A square. Something like this is very good with drafting. So as you're doing your cross piece design, wherever it fell, there we go. So you'll see little lines, maybe, yeah, like right vertical lines here and here. Those were done. Oh my goodness, I can't hold on to anything. Those are done by, putting your square on a flat side and then just creating a perpendicular line like that. And that can really help to find the center of your product and create a really nice symmetry in it. So if I were to fold this together, it comes almost perfectly. And I did not use any kind of a drafting program for this. I literally just hand drafted this from the start. So it actually comes out really nice and symmetrical. So, but yeah, that's about it for me. Again, if you have any questions, please contact me. I'm more than happy to go over things with you. So I think, yeah, perfect. Awesome.